Om Mangalam Gurudevaya Devya Matriksha Mangalam Mangalam Bhakta Vrindevyo Sarvalokaya Mangalam. Om Stapakaya Chadharmasya Sarvadharma Sarupini Avatar Varishta Ramakrishnaya Mangalam. Om Sarashiva Samarambam Shankarachara Madhyamam Ashmarachara Prayandam Vande Gurum Paramparam Guru Brahma Guru Vishnu Guru Deva Maheshwara Guru Reva Param Brahman Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Om Bhadrakali Namo Nityam Saraswati Namo Namaha Veda Viranga Vedanta Vejastana Evacha Sri Ganesha Sharada Guru Bhyo Namahari Om. Jai Ma, good evening. Happy to be continuing our discussions on the Devi Gita from the Srimad Devi Bhagavatam. An auspicious day. Yesterday we celebrated Ganesh Chaturthi, and today Rishi Panchami, auspicious day. We mentioned before we started recording. The day we honor the Sapta Rishis and also the ancient Vedic Rishis, and become a day to also honor something that's kind of mixed a little bit, almost like Guru Purnima. We honor gurus and sadhus like that, but usually it's understood to be the ancient rishis. This is the time we honor the ancient rishis, foundational rishis. Then coming up, I think on Saturday or Sunday or maybe Monday, something like that, is coming up on Ashtami is Radhashtami, Radha's birthday. So that's also a very auspicious time, a very holy time of the year. So it's also holy today because we're continuing our discussion on the Devi's beautiful form. So the gods have been prayed for thousands of years, doing tremendous austerities, and they got not yet a boon, they got the vision of the Divine Mother, first as an infinite light, then taking on the form of a woman, of the goddess, as Bhuvaneshwari, and then began to describe her form, right, the anthropomorphic form, or the iconographic form of the goddess. So I think last week we did verse 40, perhaps. Let me double check. Sorry, my notes aren't open on the right page here. So let's go. Let me find the. So I think this is 39 is the verse that we did last week. I think we'll finish tonight, God willing, Mother willing. The description, the meditation on her form as appeared as being described, what the gods beheld, right? And it went into great detail into her youth, into her dress, into her jewelry, into her makeup, into her eyes, her tinkling ankle bells, and all these wonderful details. And we spent most of this time discussing kind of the symbolic language that this iconography uses, to tell us something about the goddess. And we've kind of played a little bit with the idea of seeing, right? Darshan, drishta, and we come in this, I think the next verse is drishtatam or something. Drishtatam means seeing, but also seeing as in, they're seeing the goddess, a revelation, a manifestation of the goddess, but they're also understanding, right? So to see something is, as we said, I see it, I understand. And so it's these details being described iconographically are also ways of that. Hopefully, I believe the understanding of it is that they're gaining understanding of the goddess's nature. So a lot of the images, as we've been discussing, are images of sovereignty, of supremacy, of femininity, and a cultural ideal of femininity, especially that of motherhood, right? And also sensuality, of youth. So these are aspects of that of mother. She is the queen, the controller, but also the mother, right? A young mother at the prime of youth, right? So a lot of the images and detail that she's wearing and holding along those lines. So this is the verse we did last week. Pashankusha virabhiti chatturu bahum tarlochanam, four-armed and three-eyed, right? She held and described the most obvious iconographic details of Bhuvaneshwari. She's a four-armed goddess, right? Kali in our temple is also a four-armed goddess, and she's holding certain things or showing different gestures in her hands. these being aspects of her, things that she controls like this. So one was a noose, the pashu, and the goad or the ankush, right? We found a little bit about that. One binds, the other liberates, this type of imagery, this type of symbolism, and also two hands of that of giving blessings and giving offering fearlessness, right? And then it just says she was addressed, and the final verse the line we meditate on, she was dressed in red and appeared luster like blooms of a pomegranate. So a lot of these comparison, her lips are like lotuses, her hips are like bimba fruits. That's a very common way of describing this poetic language. So her dress itself appeared like the blooms of a pomegranate fruit. We mentioned a little bit last week what that could mean. So the next verse, let's just jump to the next verse. So actually, this only pretty much half a line, the description of the goddess is going to be concluded with just a little detail of how she's dressed, of what her cloth is, what sari she's wearing or cloth she's wearing, right? It says sarva-śṛṅgāra-veṣāḍhyāṃ. In the previous verse or two verses back, it mentioned that her cloth was rakta, was blood red. You see that verse is there. Somewhere in here it's there. Sorry. She was in the last verse. She was rakta vastra. Her cloth is red. So now a little more detail. It says richly adorned in garments all suited for love. So this is a very interesting. When I first read this many years ago in the translation we have, I thought, well, that's a very, of course, it's a provocative statement, right? But it's a very interesting. I mean, it's a poetically said. So I was wondering what exactly the Sanskrit is. Śṛṅgāra. Sarva-śṛṅgāra. Sarva means all, right? And śṛṅgāra means love. And so it's all suited for love, but it means romantic love. It means erotic love. So it means she's dressed in a way that's suited for romance. So once again, signaling a detail we're supposed to see about the Divine Mother, right? By seeing this image of how she's dressed, right? What we're supposed to see or understand is that she's the juice that creates life. She's the feminine power and beauty that creates life, right? She's the sensuality in life itself, right? So sarva-śṛṅgāra, right? Also, it has several meanings. One of the things, sarva-śṛṅgāra means really like a fine garment. She's dressed very well, right? So that's sarva-śṛṅgāra. But śṛṅgāra has a very specific meaning, right? Śṛṅgāra means love. That's how he's translated it very tactfully, but it means sexual passion or desire for enjoyment, right? And it says veṣāḍhyāṃ, so she's well dressed. Veṣāḍhyāṃ means that she's very well dressed. She's very well dressed in cloth that has sarva-śṛṅgāra, translated all suited for love, right? And she was worshipped by all the gods. So that's actually that line. There's a few more little things about her compassionate faith, and she's the image of compassion, like that. But actually, the descriptions of her physical descriptions or iconographic descriptions ends almost with this line, right? So we can think I believe it crescendos with this line and gives a detail, the last little details about her as the world mother and the world deluder and the world who fulfills all desires. Those qualities that are just describing her qualities, her aspects, not her iconography. I think the commentary for those qualities is in the Śṛṅgāra, and this sarva-śṛṅgāra-veṣāḍhyāṃ. So Śṛṅgāra in Sanskrit or Indic aesthetics, right? They call them the 8 rasas, right? 9 rasas. And rasa means taste. It means juice, a flavor, right? Flavor is probably a very good way to describe rasa, right? And so there's different aesthetic flavors, right? And this is especially shown if you've studied or know somebody who has studied Bharatanatyam dance or Odissi dance, some of these classical dance like that, or even if you've watched like old Indian movies, right? Some of like the devotional movies, Mahabharata, Ramayana, things like that. You'll see that there's, I mean, it doesn't, Indian movies, even in modern times, sometimes don't have the speed of editing that we're accustomed to. And, you know, somebody will say, I mean, if you watched it, somebody will say something. We watched fairly recently, thousands of hours of the Devi Gita Mahadev. So these images are freshly in my mind. But, you know, somebody will say something dramatic, right? And then 7 people will react differently. And the camera will slowly go from one to somebody like, oh, like this, you know, all the different facial expressions, right? Because each one, it's so thickly based upon Indian aesthetics theory, the 9 rasas. Each one will react according to a different relationship and a different backstory, right? So one sister will be like become jealous from that statement. Another sister will become angry. Another sister will become aroused. Another sister will become proud, right? By the same statement. Because then, you know, it's like, and so you show that, you have to show it in each of the characters, right? And so with eye expressions and hand gestures and things like that, right? So each one of these is these 9 primary rasas. These 9 rasas mix in different ways to create unlimited amounts of flavors of relationship and experience. Right, and so it's the 9 rasas begin with Śṛṅgāra, right? So it says sarva-śṛṅgāra, right? Sarva-śṛṅgāra-veṣāḍhyāṃ, dressed. So it could be interpreted, and I've seen some comments like this, that it's like she has in her dress all the rasas. Sarva-śṛṅgāra means, but it doesn't actually say like Śṛṅgāri or something like a beginning with. Right, so we can't give that, but we have to understand what are those different rasas, of which Śṛṅgāra is the queen. It's listed as a queen of rasas or the king of rasas, the supreme rasa, right? So those rasas, I'll list them to you. You don't need to, I mean, if you want to study, these are interesting ideas. Śṛṅgāra means love or romance or erotic, sensual love, right? Hasya means mirth. Raudra means anger or fury. Right, karunya is compassion, right? Bhibhasta means disgust. Bhayanaka means fear or horror. Vira or virya means heroism, right? And heroic, and then adbhuta means like wonder, like wonderful, like strange wonder, right? And then shanta is tranquility, peacefulness. So these are the 9 primary rasas, right? And a lot of traditional art and plays and poetry uses as a foundation the relationship between a man and a woman as a theme that's symbolic, sometimes a direct theme, sometimes a symbolic theme, right? And so these are all, I mean, these are experiences, these are emotions and sentiments and flavors that we can have in many different ways amongst different types of people, right? But all of them are part of a relationship between a male and female relationship. And of those, the one, the kingpin, the pin that holds it all together of the male-female relationship in this system is Śṛṅgāra, right? Śṛṅgāra, the romantic, erotic sentiment, right? That causes all the different permutations of these different rasas in relationship, right? And also it's used a lot because it's also a very good metaphor or symbol for the relationship between the soul and God, right? So the romantic relationship, the love relationship, where one longs and one's excited and one one has union and separation, all the different things that come, is a wonderful, it's used by poets, by mystic poets, so let's be specific, by mystic poets across traditions, right? We have it in Christianity and Islam and many other things, like in Vaishnavism, like that. But a lot of it in Hindu tradition, it's very explicit, where the romantic is used as a symbol, or a perfect symbol, or a close symbol, not a perfect symbol, for the longing between the soul and God, right? Between God and the individual and the divine, right? So Śṛṅgāra, sorry, is the mother. It's considered the mother of all rasas, and because it also, by mixing itself, right, with the other rasas, it generates another category of aesthetic categories or feelings, such as fear. I'm sorry. Anyways, it is unlimited, because almost any emotion can be put into one of these. It comes from that, right? So by saying sarva-śṛṅgāra, she's wearing her cloth indicative, suited, meant to elicit or to understand this love or romance, right? Means it's full of bhava, it's full of rasa, it's full of feeling, full of emotion, right? She's not static, right? And I think this is one of the important things we talked several classes ago, right? This is maybe one definition of Shaktism, is that the idea that the absolute is intrinsically dynamic and not static, right? You have Brahmin, certain schools of absolutist, of non-dualism, Shankara's Vedanta and the like, and some of those scholastic schools that come from Shankara and post-Shankara have a very static idea of the absolute, right? And then the manifestation, right, or what we see, our experience of the world of name and form, of duality and the like, and multiplicity, in a certain sense, is given, because we can't deny it, we experience it, so it's given a provisional reality, but it's not actually real ultimately, right? When we see the truth, it will disappear, right, in some sense, and we will behold or understand or become one with. Different traditions have slightly different language for that. The static, non-changing, infinite, all-pervasive, only one reality, right? But she's showing what she's wearing. She's showing all the rasas, the mother of all rasas, right? Śṛṅgāra, right? Showing that it's juicy. The absolute is juicy, right? That's a way of saying it. So the absolute is full of the absolute is dynamic. So that is, we call that Shakti. A dynamic absolute is the nature of Shakti. Sri Ramakrishna said that Brahman and Shakti, right, the absolute or the infinite, or the absolute and the relative, or seemingly relative, the manifest, they're non-abhed, they're not different, right? So, so that, I think we have to, all the symbols that she's given in descriptions are pointing to that. This final symbol, I think, really points to it. This final detail really points to it. So the opening line of her description described her as a woman, a girl of the fullness of youth, right, with upraised breasts, like that put to shame, newly budded lotuses. All these languages are there. It started like this, right? But she's mother. Actually, the final line in this section is she's Jaganmata. She's the divine. She is the world mother, right? So we're not losing the mother, but it's an erotic mother, or a sensual mother, or a romantic mother, or a juicy mother, right? And so one problem is that the idea of motherhood and of eroticism in the rasas, they don't always mix, right? We don't mix the sentiments, right? A child normally doesn't have erotic understanding of his mother, but the mother, to be a mother, requires a sense of eroticism, because only somebody becomes a mother when they give birth, and they give birth from the connection, right? And so even if you say somebody, oh, somebody's very motherly, right? You're saying, oh, they have the personality of somebody that's actually a mother, somebody that's given birth. Somebody who's motherly is somebody who acts as if, or has the qualities of somebody who actually gave birth, somebody who was erotically active, right? And so I was actually thinking the other day, like this is a kind of strange for us sometimes. We don't always think of the Divine Mother as, but mother is she gives birth. But where can we see that? We're now thinking, what's another image of that? Kind of in the Western-ish. Mary doesn't quite have that. She's the Virgin Mary, right? We don't have that exactly. We were denied that meditation, right? But I was thinking like Gaia, like Mother Earth, right? She's the mother, right? But she's sensual in a certain sense, right? She's earthy, literally. She's the earth, right? So that might be a way of maybe a way to latch the understanding on something that's erotic or sensual or romantic, but mother, right? And mother is here the source, not only the one who gives birth, but she's the source and foundation, right? The womb of everything. So in this verse, let's look here again. Let's see. Let's see here. Sorry. Sarva-śṛṅgāra-veṣāḍhyāṃ, sarva-deva-namaskṛtām. So the last physical detail, she's dressed in very well dressed in garments suited for love, śṛṅgāra rasa, right? And then it says, what do the gods, now we finally see what the gods are doing in all this. So now the response to the gods is that they sarva-deva, all the gods, namaskṛtām, they bow, right? Seeing her, of course, we spent months, 20 verses on this and several months describing it, right? But they simply see her, right? And seeing her, they understand certain things that she's revealing in the image, right? And their response, the proper response to this is namaskṛtām, is to bow, right? And then, so she's worshipped by all the gods. She's a source of rasa, of expression, of emotion, of manifestation, right? The mother, right? So the second half of the line, I think, describes this a little bit philosophically. What the previous verses have been described iconographically will now be described a little bit philosophically or theologically, right? Sarva-śā-pūrikāṃ sarva-śā-pūrikāṃ sarva-mātaraṃ sarva-mohinīm, right? So sarva-vāśā-pūrikāṃ. Let me find my verse here. Sarva-vāśā means sarva asha, all hopes, all wishes, all desires, right? She satisfies all purikāṃ means to satisfy, right? She satisfies, the one they're bowing to, who appeared this way, is the one who satisfies all of our hopes, aspirations, wishes, and desires. That's her. Now we're actually getting not just an iconographic description. Now we're getting a theological point. It's she, right? The goddess, the Bhuvaneshwari, Divine Mother, who satisfies all of our longings of our heart, our desires, our wishes, our aspirations, right? Sarva-śā-pūrikāṃ. So the next line, sarva-mātaraṃ. She is the mother of all. Sarva means all, mātaraṃ. Mata means mother, right? And then the final line is a little bewildering. Sarva-mohinīm. She's the bewilder of all, bewilderer or deluder of all, right? Moha means delusion, confusion, delusion. So this is the mother that we're praying to, that's being revealed to. Actually, it may not be the mother. We may have not have known that this is the mother we're praying to, right? But this is the mother that has responded, right? And what she's saying, what we learn about her, what they're seeing and understanding, and who they're bowing to, She's the one who fulfills all our desires. She is the mother of she is the universal mother, the mother of all, but also the deluder of all. So we can look a little bit at this sarvāśā-pūrikāṃ. This morning or this afternoon, I was looking at these verses, realizing, oh my God, class is coming. That's why we had some guests today, so we're a little late starting. So I hadn't had a chance to really look at the verses, meditate on the verses throughout the day like I would have liked to, right? But looking at the verse this morning, I was thinking, well, there's many ways to understand what does it mean to the one who satisfies all desires, right? Or everyone's desires or all desires, right? One is that every time we have a desire and our desire is satisfied, right? She's the one that's done it. So that's seeing her, and we can see that's a particular stage or mood of a devotee. Something good happens in your life. Oh, God has done that, right? Thanks be to God that has happened. I was successful in something. That's God's grace. I had a desire. That desire was fulfilled. That's God's grace. And I think that's itself a very powerful religious realization or understanding that everything we have, everything we get, every desire fulfilled is coming from God, right? And sometimes, we think in the devotional tradition, we think that we should have selfless devotion. We worship God not to get anything, but to have because God's wonderful, or to get God, not to get anything, right? Not have a selfish desire, overtly selfish desire as a motivation. And something we critique, I myself have, especially in my early idealistic days, very much critiqued this type of religion. I may have told the story, I've told the story many times. I may have told the story in these classes also, but there's a book, this came to my mind again. There's a book by, it's called Perfect Questions, Perfect Answer. It's the book somebody interviewed Srila Prabhupada. It's a Hare Krishna founder in Mayapur. It was a volunteer in India, had a Peace Corps volunteer conversation with him, and he made a comment. Well, it's wrong that the person interviewing or asking Srila Prabhupada said it's wrong. Isn't it wrong that people pray to Krishna for money? Right? And he said, no, prayer is always good. Right, that line really struck me, right, when I was a young teenager. Prayer is always good, right? He says, and Krishna will give them money. Not only will Krishna give them money, but they have an understanding, at least they have an understanding that everything they get is coming from God. Our breath is coming from God, our food's coming from God, everything is light, so everything is coming from God, right? And therefore that's a bit powerful realization, right? At least they know where money comes from, where goods come from, where happiness comes from. And therefore, most people don't know. Many people don't know that and suffer. Those who know it, maybe they know where to ask, where to dig, where to search for. So it could be something like that. She's the one who satisfies all desires, right? Maybe that's not the highest motivation for worship, but it's I think a powerful realization or a powerful devotional sentiment, stage of devotional sentiment, right? Right. Another is that she satiates our desires. Means that by her grace, all of our desires are fulfilled, means we no longer desire. We're no longer hankering after deep, small things, right? That when we have her, or by her grace, when we have her, desires for a million things disappears. That's what we really want. We mentioned last week. Maybe what we really want is her, and wanting everything else. Right, or by her great, and in Vedanta and some of the yoga schools, we think, oh, desire is the thing that stops us from spiritual attainment, right? And so, but she fulfills all desires, means that we no longer have desires. In which case, we can progress spiritually, and I think that could be a way of understanding this, right? But there's a sense, and then I think if I don't have the book with me, but I think Mackenzie Brown, in his footnote or commentary on this verse. He may hint, if I remember, he hints a little something, maybe something a little bit more profound, especially considering the very next line is almost the next word is she deludes all. is that she fulfills our desires, and in so doing, she keeps us bound. Right? Remember, she has a noose as well as a goad, right? The noose binds us, right? And she's the one who deludes or binds everybody, right? And how does she do that? Maybe she does so by granting desires, right? We get desires, we fulfill desires, and that cements our attachments and relationships with this world that she's also created, right? So this is an interesting idea that she is, and we'll meditate on these verses in the Chandi. There's so many verses like this, that she's Mahavidya, Mahamaya, Mahasmriti, Mahameda, all these Mahamoha, these different words like that, that she's the great illusion, the great delusion, the great wisdom, the great liberator, the great God, the great demon. She's the full spectrum, right? And so here she is, she's a mother, and we usually think of, so she satisfies all desires. Maybe in so doing so, she's granting us blessings and thus keeping us bound. I think last week we mentioned a little difference between getting Ma's blessings and getting a blessing or a boon, right? You get a boon, right? Maybe you ask something and then you receive it, right? And that may just keep you bound. Maybe a bigger blessing or compassion is to take away our desires rather than fulfill our desires, right? So this may be a sign of her granting desires, fulfilling desires, right? And thus keeping us in her play, right? That's part of her aspect as Mahamaya, as sarva-mohinīm, right? In this line, right? Mahamaya and other texts. And in the previous, where was this? I'm gonna go back here. We described the kleshas. I think last week or the week before we mentioned the different coverings that in Tantra we have the one revealed, the way the absolute covers itself and seemingly limits itself into the world of name and form expression is by these coverings, right? So there's some idea here that this is her process. One of the process of creation, of creating a world, right, is by covering herself or covering us with the kleshas, the coverings, right? And that is what gives birth to this world. By covering herself with the kleshas, beginning with desire and all these type of things, right? She seems to limit herself and thus becomes a world, and thus in a very real sense becomes the mother of the world and our mother, right? And she does it by desire, So then it says mother. So that could be a way of understanding the mother, not just, oh, she is my mommy, right? And she's a source, right? In what sense? How does she create? She creates a world. She creates us and creates a world out of what? Out of herself, right? The one takes on the semblance of difference and a semblance of distinction and of duality and multiplicity, right? Through desires and individuality, right? And then that final line, sarva-mohinīm, the deluder of all. Very interesting. I was reminded from the Devi Mahatmyam. There is a that line I was trying to remember just now. I wrote it down. This is from the Rakti Suktam. This is from the first chapter of the Chandi, Devi Mahatmyam. Lord Brahma is praying to Yogamaya, Yoganidra Devi, to withdraw herself from Vishnu so that these two demons can be killed, Madhu and Kaitava, if you know the story, right? And the great litany, operatic litany, is very beautiful, describing her. Every line is explosive meditation on the nature of supreme reality, right? But to me, one of the lines that really has really gets me, right? Verse I don't remember, but I'll recite. You can find it easily enough. Mahavidya, Mahamaya, Mahamedha, Mahasmritihi, Mahamoha Chabhavati, Mahadevi, Mahasuri. Right, I quote this a lot, especially this last line, Mahadevi, Mahasuri. I quote a lot. Right, but the whole line is very interesting. Mahavidya, Mahamaya. You are, oh, this is a prayer. I'm not sure if it's you are or she is, but you are, oh goddess, right? Mahavidya, the great knowledge, the great wisdom, right? So that's, you can say, oh, that's somebody to pray to, right? You're the great source of wisdom, your wisdom itself, like this, right? Also, Mahamaya, she's the great. Now it's difficult. How do you translate Maya? Of course, how you translate Maya is gonna color your understanding of this. Maya is ignorance or illusion or delusion. In classical Vedanta, it's interpreted this way. Maya has many levels of interpretation, but Maya is this world of duality, right? The world of name and form is caused by Maya somehow, right? By some understanding of Maya. You are great wisdom and knowledge. You are also the deluding power, right? That causes us in this world of name and form, right? Mahamedha. Medha is like Medha is like a very subtle intelligence. Medha is like a very subtle spiritual intelligence. So akin, I think, in this kind of dual description, it's akin to Mahavidya. Medas is in that category, right? But then the next line it says, and Maha-smriti, great memory, right? Smriti, memory, is a very important part of intelligence, right? Right. And then Maha-moha. Moha is confusion or delusion, right? So here, her name here is in this verse is Mohinīm, right? You are knowledge. You're the great knowledge and the great ignorance. You are the great intelligence, the great memory, as well as the great delusion or bewilderment, right? Right. Cha bhavati, that, and oh dear bhavati, oh dear woman, or respected woman, the goddess that he's talking to, right, in that text, right? You are Mahadevi, Mahasuri. You are the great goddess, the Mahadevi, and the Mahasuri, and the great demoness, or the great demon or demoness, right? You're the full spectrum, right? Ignorance and knowledge, bondage and liberation, birth, death, the whole thing like that, but especially as being the mother of everything. How are your mothers? As wisdom, as Mahavidya and Mahamaya and Mahamoha. Sri Ramakrishna uses these terms a lot. Mahavidya, Avidyamaya, he called it Vidyamaya Shakti and Avidyamaya Shakti. Maybe you've heard, if you read the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, you may have read these lines. Vidyamaya Shakti, Vidyamaya is the power of the Divine Mother that grants wisdom or knowledge. And Avidyamaya Shakti is the power of the Divine Mother that deludes us, that binds us, right? And they're both her, and they're both controlled by her, right? So this verse, by calling her Maha as a great mother as well as a great deluder, I think is attributing similar to that. In the Narayani Stuti, in the Devi Mahatmyam, those are the verses, Narayani Namosute. I think it's maybe in the 11th, little jumbled today. I think it's the 11th chapter. There's a line close to the beginning. It says, Samohitam Devi Samastam etat Tvambai Prasana Bhuvi Mukti Hetu. You have thrown, you, O mother. I mean, now this is after the whole Chandi battle has happened, right? Now the God, this is their final realization, praying to Divine Mother, right? So they're praising her. They're not critiquing her for this, right? But the way they praise her is, you all have been thrown into delusion. Samohitam Devi, Samastam etat. You have thrown everyone into delusion by you, right? All have been thrown into delusion by you, O Devi. And by your mercy, you are the cause of their liberation. Bhuvi mukti hetu. You are prasana bhuvi mukti hetu. Right? You are the cause. Everyone has been thrown into delusion by you, and by your grace, they can be liberated. You are the cause of liberation. And that's how actually the whole Chandi starts. One of the opening statements that the sage made us says, it says that when they ask what is Mahamaya, she says she is the one that's thrown everybody into delusion. But when she's worshipped, when she's pleased and perpetuated, she also grants liberation. She's Vidyamaya and Avidyamaya Shakti, another way of saying Mahavidya, Mahamaya. way of saying that same thing. So they're not critiquing her, they're praising her, because this is their profound understanding. And that's why I think some people will critique our tradition of interpreting the Devi Mahatmyam as being a little bit unmoored from the original text. We start giving a very symbolic interpretation. This demon represents this, and this demon represents this, and this part of the battle becomes an aspect of sadhana, right? And there's ancient commentary along those lines. It's kind of our tradition of interpretation. Others will critique that as inappropriate, right? Reading into a text, right? But it comes from this idea that they've realized from what they've seen in the battle, in the Chandi, in the Devi Mahatmyam, they've realized that she's the one that throws everyone into illusion, but when pleased, liberates us from illusion, right? So they understand her. What do they see? This whole battle has taught them, right? Symbolically, metaphorically taught them about the nature of the inner struggles and the things you overcome to go from one in ignorance to one in knowledge to one bound to one liberated, right? So they're praising her with this statement that Ayani Stuti is a verses of praise, right? They're praising her. You are the one that throws all delusion. That's a weird thing to say to somebody, right? I really like you because you're the one that causes everyone suffering, right? Right. It is a profound realization of just how profound her nature is, right? That as a source of everything, how is she the source of everything, right? So Sri Ramakrishna said that we sometimes think we should fight Maya, right? You know, if you've heard this term, to fight Maya, resist Maya, fight Maya. Sri Ramakrishna said you cannot fight Maya because it's her, right? The one we're trying to worship is the one who's keeping us bound, right? He says you need to perpetuate Maya, you need to worship Maya, right? And so that is called Shakti Puja, Kali Puja, Devi worship, right? It's ritually we do it by worshiping the goddess as Mahamaya. She is Maya, and she withdraws that quality of herself, of limiting the covering quality, and gives us liberation, perhaps, right? But also it's also done by a shift in the way we view the world, right? The world is something we need to fight, or the world we should worship. If we're fighting the world, struggling, fighting against, pushing it away, or rather grabbing it or pushing it away, neither grabbing or pushing away is respectful. Grabbing it, the selfish, pushing away is disrespectful, right? You can worship the world, right, as her manifestation. We're part of her manifestation, everyone we know, everything we know, right? It's a very profound understanding, right? And that these verses lead to that understanding, you know, I think are showing you this understanding. So let's look at the verse again here. Satisfying all desire, she is a mother of all and the deluder of all. So let's see what else it said. So now the last little detail of her description is given, right? And it says, mother's kindly face, so gracious, displayed a tender smile on her lotus mouth. So their final, she's gonna be there in front of them for 600 something more verses. She doesn't disappear from their sight yet, right? But this is the last description, physical description, that her face is smiling, right? Prasāda-sumukhīm-ambāṃ, right? Prasāda-sumukhīm-ambāṃ, manda-smrita-mukhāmbujām, avyāja-karuṇā-mūrtiṃ, dadṛśuḥ, purataḥ, surāḥ. So prasāda-sumukhīm-ambāṃ. Prasada means beautiful, serene, merciful, idea, right? And sumukhīm, mukhīm has two meanings. It means face and it means lips, right? So here he's interpreting it to be lips, but it's also describing, like, for instance, when somebody smiles, they smile with their lips, right? Their mouth, right? But we smile with our face, the mouth is the predominant, the star of the show, right? But you can smile with your eyes, with your cheeks, right? With your dimples, with your forehead. You know, when somebody's frowning or smiling, we usually draw it as like a little detail of the lips, but it's more than the lips, right? It's a face, right? So her sumukhīm means her good face. That's a way of saying beautiful face, right? Her beautiful lips, right? So mother's kindly face, so gracious, displayed a tender smile on her lotus mouth. So he does translate his face. That's sorry. Ambāṃ, prasāda-sumukhīm-ambāṃ. Ambāṃ again means mother. In this previous verse, sarva-mātaraṃ, right? She's the world mother. And again here, now she's being addressed as mother. Amba is even sweeter. Right? Amba means it's a very beautiful name for a mother, right? Then it says manda-smrita-mukhāmbujām. Manda-smrita means smile, right? Mukha, again, mouth or face. Here he's translated because smile is connected to the mouth usually. So it's the face, and the mouth. And then ambujām, lotus. So again, the description describing her comparison to her lotus-like mouth or lotus mouth. So that's an interesting. It's probably her mouth is probably not shaped with a bunch of leaves like this, but means once again, it's all based upon poetry and aesthetics, right? A blooming lotus, so beautiful, right? It's flush, full, opening, right? So that idea that it's so beautiful and auspicious and luscious and unfolding, you know, that blooming is a great term. Displayed a tender smile on her lotus mouth, right? Avyāja-karuṇā-mūrtiṃ. Karuna-mūrtiṃ. So he says here, the embodiment of unfeigned compassion. Karuna-mūrtiṃ. Murti means form or image, or embodiment, I think, is also interesting. That's a nice way of saying it also. But the image, this image of compassion, this picture of compassion, right? This embodiment of compassion, right? So all three would work, right? And it's avyāja. Avyāja means without fraud, without pretense, right? Without guile. It's not pretend, right? You know, we can pretend to be compassionate. We can pretend to care. We try to care, but we maybe, you know, we want to, like, we go through the signs. Oh, are you okay? Right? You know, these are a lot of it social. You know, we're expected to do like this, right? She's not pretending, right? That's the thing. Is avyāja-karuṇā-mūrtiṃ. She literally is the image of compassion, right? Her beautiful smile on her beautiful face, right? Tender smile on her beautiful face is authentic, right? And the quality of her face now is being described as the whole image is just pure compassion, right? Dadṛśuḥ purataḥ surāḥ. Dadṛśuḥ means to see or behold. So here he's translated as beheld, and then purataḥ, in front of, right? Surāḥ, the gods, right? So this embodiment of unfeigned compassion, the gods beheld, he said, in front of them. This is what it was directly in front of them, right? She has been described in iconographically and in our hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of discussion, right? Over described perhaps, right? In so many ways. She's the cause, she's the mother, she represents birth, she represents life, she represents sovereignty and control and supremacy, or all these different things like that. But the most profound feature here is that of compassion, right? Compassion. So we have mothers, we all have mothers, had mothers, right? And we have mothers in our lives, right? You know, mother figures in our lives. We understand what like a mother's compassion, at least theoretically, is, right? We read about it. We read about it if we didn't experience it, right? But most of us experience in some sense mother's love, right? And hopefully, if you haven't, we wish you experience the divine mother's love for sure, right? That a mother wants you to be happy, right? That's one thing. A compassionate mother wants you to be happy, but she wants you to be ultimately happy. She wants you to be successful. She wants you to be happy. She doesn't want you to suffer, but she wants you to be successful. And sometimes being successful means a little suffering. We talked a little bit about this when we were talking about the Odyssey and the problem of evil and some of the early verses, right? In this chapter, right, where a mother doesn't want her son or daughter to be heartbroken, right? But knowing that, oh, but you'll have to be heartbroken a little bit in your life, otherwise you won't grow up and mature. So the mother doesn't want you to be happy, but it wants you to be ultimately happy. And so this whole description, some would say, I'm venturing to present before you a way of interpreting it, is ultimately compassionate, right? So that we were seeing the big picture, both the mother of the world and the deluder of the world, Mahavidya, Mahamaya, right? So that we can know her, that we can attain the final aim, right? That the core message is compassion. The core thing, the core of the whole thing is love, her love for us, right? And they're beholding this, means they're seeing it, they're understanding it. This is what they got from this revelation, right? The mother, all the description, what they're seeing as is the embodiment of love and compassion. That's what they're seeing. But their understanding, what they're seeing, is the fulfiller of all desires, dressed in Śṛṅgāra rasa, right? The cause of illusion and delusion, who binds us or binds us with the noose and rips us open with her hook, the whole thing. But all that, what they're understanding, what they're seeing, beholding in front of them, right? Clear as seeing somebody in front of you, right? This is what they're understanding, the embodiment of unfeigned compassion. Let's look at the next verse. When this term beheld, dadṛśuḥ, right, to behold, not just to see but to understand. I mentioned this before, but this is the way I tend to understand Puranas. I love speaking on Puranas. This is a Purana, right? And the stories in the Puranas, I see it this way, and the questions and answers, and the revelations and image and visions, visionary experiences and things that happen. I understand it as a play between revelation and realization, right? When God shows you something, right, that's a revelation, right? What you get from that is what you realize, right? That's a realization, right? So this image that had been presented in the last 20 verses, or whatever verses, how many verses it is, of describing her image, is her self-revelation, right? She shows herself in this form and shows all these aspects of herself. This is her initial encounter with her, right? And this is also what they understand of her, right? This is what they've gotten. This is what, and so in a certain sense, you have to think of it a little bit, I would get my emotional kind of humanizing of it, right, is like somebody says, show me, and then the person responds, I will show you, right? And then that's the revelation, right? And then the response is, oh, I see. That's a realization, right? Show me, and I'll show you, and I'll see. These are all beheld, implied by the dadṛśuḥ, right? That the seeing or understanding. I'll show you, and then you think, oh, you've shown me, I now see, right? So this is that verse where it ends here. Right? Drishtatam. Drishtva means having seen, right? In the last verse, they see. In this verse, verse 42, having seen, right? Who? Tam. Tam means her, right? Right. This is also, again, this is a Shakta text, and when it first appeared in the Vedantic light, it's neither male, female, or anything in between, or combination, then took a decidedly feminine form, right? Seeing her, who? Bhuvaneshwari. So all that implies, right? And then it says Karuna-mūrtiṃ. Again, this Karuna-mūrtiṃ, the embodiment of compassion, or the image of compassion, the picture of compassion, the solidified compassion, right? What do they do? Pranamuhu, pranemuhu sadharam surāḥ. They all, sadharam means respect. I believe, from my understanding, some of these words go beyond my Sanskrit. I mean, very quickly go beyond my Sanskrit knowledge, but I understand it to be very respectfully. With what do? They pranemuhu. They bowed to her, right, with great respect, respectfully, right? Surāḥ, the gods bowed low. How do they translate? Seeing her, the embodiment of compassion, the entire host of gods bowed low. I was looking at this entire host of gods. I was thinking maybe sadhara means something like that. I'm not sure. For what I understood, it means respectfully, but maybe it means as a group or something. I don't know. Maybe there's a second meaning. I don't know. So then what happened? So they bow. So that's a natural response. Seeing what they've seen, not what they've seen, understanding what they've understood, but understanding whom they've understood. Seeing what they've seen, seeing whom they've seen, understanding being the same thing as understanding what they've understood and understanding whom they've understood, the beginning understanding of the goddess's nature, right? The proper response is to bow with devotion, right? Especially when you're seeing this embodiment, image of compassion, right? But then this last line, the second part of the line, to me is very moving. Vaktum nashaknuvan kinchit vaspa samruddha nihisvanaha. Didn't go off my tongue easily, this one. Vaktum. Vaktum means to speak. Let's look at a few of these words. Vaktum means to speak, right? Not. They couldn't speak. Na saknuvan. Ashak. Na, so that nashak means na ashak. Ashak means unable. We get the similar word, not similar word, that shakti. Shakti means to be able to do something, power to do something. Ashakti means unable. So they're unable to speak. Speaking not, they're unable, right? Nuvam means to praise or to make a sound. They can't make a sound, right? Kinchid vasta samruddha nishvaha. Kinchid means a little something. The response to what they've seen and who they've seen, what they've understood and whom they've understood something. The response is they cannot speak. They can't find the word. They get overwhelmed, right? Choking on tears of silence. What an image. Right. This is becoming overwhelmed, right? And this is a very, this is a symptom. This is one of the symptoms of a spiritual symptom, right? Of a spiritual experience. Very often, profound spiritual experiences, you become overwhelmed. You choke. We choke up, right? Get overwhelmed. We cannot, our mind and our language can't find the words, or sometimes it's the emotion becomes so intense we can't speak, right? Maybe we had the words, if maybe we could have the words if the emotions weren't overwhelming, right? So the nishvayaha means soundless or silence. So unable to speak, choking on their own emotion and tears, they simply were in silence. So the proper response to such realization or such revelation is only possible. Not only the proper response, the only possible response at a certain level is silence, showing like that. And the last verse we'll discuss tonight, right? Take my notes here. Kanchit starayama alambya bhaktacha nattakhandaraha. Looking on 2 pages here. Prema ashru purna nayana stustuvur chagarambikam. I love this verse very much. Kantanchit staryama alambya bhaktacha. So he's translated struggling to regain their composure, right? Katanchit, somehow or another, they pull themselves together, not just be overwhelmed like this. They pull their emotion, they begin to gather, try to get a little bit of grip. We use the term grip on this staira. Maybe I could have a grip, get a grip, getting a grip on their own emotions a little bit, right? And it's nattakhandaraha, meaning they bowed. They're bowing with devotion. Bhaktya chandata khandaraha. They're gripping their emotion, holding, trying to somehow or another, pulling their mind together, pulling their emotions, pull themselves together, gaining their composure. They, out of devotion, their head goes down. They're bowing with devotion, right? Prema ashru purna nayana. This is a beautiful way of saying it. Prema means love. Ashru means flowing, right? Purna means filled, and nayana means eyes. So this is beautiful. So their eyes brimming with tears of living joy, right? So their eyes, filled with flowing love. What a beautiful way of describing. Only tears tears of love came from their eyes. Prema ashru purna nayana stutstuvur jagarambika. Their eyes brimming with tears, or full eyes flowing, filled and flowing, right? With love, means tears of love, right? They sang hymns, right, to Jagadambika, the world mother, the mother of the world. So these are symptoms of love, right? Tears and silence and being overwhelmed with emotion. These are symptoms of love. These are also symptoms of spiritual feeling, right? And I'm not out in the. Most of you have more experience of this than I do now, because we're in our temple, and we have barely been, to Trader Joe's in 3 years, but to speak of the last 20 years been in the temple, right? We have our satsang is a certain people are attracted to Kali Mandir that are a little bit like-minded, right? And Ramakrishna tradition that we're a emotional and devotional and dramatic tradition, right? The type of devotion that Ramakrishna had, Chaitanya had, that we're, as our followers, are in that same mode, but we tend to not display, right, publicly too much our spiritual sentiment, emotion, and nor talk about our spiritual experience except to the guru or to one or two close friends, right? Sri Ramakrishna also said, like, you should have one or two. Swami Bhajanananda said, don't say every spiritual experience to everybody you know, right? Maybe have one friend that can understand your heart, right, and understand what you're going through, right? Otherwise, you lose it. What is Swami Neem Curly Baba said? Don't talk about your bank balance, your wife or your husband, or your sadhana, your spiritual. Oh, they'll go away, right? People know about it, they go away, right? So I think it's something, and also not only not talking so much about it, but also not trying necessarily, don't try to hide and pretend something you're not, right? But not trying to overly exaggerate or dramatize our spiritual emotion, right? And sometimes in the larger spiritual tradition, the largest spiritual communities in the West, I've noticed in the early years, less now at Kali Mandir because of, like I said, our satsang has developed around us, that being very I say I'm using judgy terms, right? Ungrounded or right. I describe it. One of my teachers made, I tell you, a correction, a personal correction, when somebody I was and somebody else was a little bit. My tendency is to be a little bit reticent also, but sometimes something comes out or something like that in the early days, and our enthusiasm and immaturity. And then one senior devotee said that if the emotion comes out and it's simply expressed, then it's gone, right? The energy is gone, right? And it's wonderful, but it's gone, right? If you can hold it a little bit, right, then you digest it, and you internalize it, right? And so, being that that's generally our tendency, right, to internalize it and not overly show, right, still sometimes it comes out. So, I mean, some people, in spite of that, some people become exuberantly happy, or tears come, or you can't speak, or something like this. People in spiritual life, it has to happen. If it doesn't happen, something's wrong, right? We need to liven up a little bit our spiritual life. And so I sometimes think it's kind of like over boiling milk, right? When the milk's on when the pot's on the flame, right? You can try. I boil milk a lot in order to make paneer and cheese and things like this, right? So just recently it happened. You have to. Your goal is to boil the milk, but not to let it rise and pour out and create a mess, right? So we try our best, but sometimes, in spite of the fact that you're trying to remove the pot before it makes a dramatic mess, sometimes the milk overboils, right? And the fact that if that happens, that it's not when you're trying that it doesn't happen and it happens, I think that's okay. That you're not, it's milk overboils sometimes. And as soon as you take it off the fire, it again comes down again, right? And so they overwhelmed with emotion, they pulled them, they internalized it. Somehow or another, it says, somehow or another, they pulled it together, right? Right. So trying to control and not show, but also not trying to hide. That's not a thing either, right? Because that's also another play of the ego, I think, right? So what do they do then? If they can't speak, they're overwhelmed. Their eyes are flowing with tears of love. Right, their only response is to cry and be overwhelmed and bow their head. Right, there's words don't come. Right, what can we say? Right, but there are words to say. So here it says they glorified Jagadambikam, the world mother, with hymns, with stutis. Right, they hymned her. Right, and so next week we'll read. I think there's 5 verses or something like that they sang, right? And these are not verses that they wrote. It's not spontaneous words of their understanding, because their understanding is overwhelmed, right? They can't think straight. They're overwhelmed. They're choked up. They're crying, right? What did they say? If they say anything, it's going to be gobbledygook, overwhelmed, So what do? They have things to say. they have the words of the scriptures. They have the hymns of the scriptures. So the first verse they chant is a verse from the Chandi, from the Devi Mahatmya. Namo Devi Mahadevi Shiva Siddhamma. I think. I haven't looked for a while, but I'm pretty sure it's that verse. I love that verse. Right. And then there's a verse from the Shakti Upanishads. And there, you know, so the verses that they recite are verses that are from other texts, verses from the liturgical verses that they've learned, right? Remember, they spent thousands of years reciting hymns, so they knew these hymns. So the purpose of the hymns is to get Ma's response, and their response from Ma's response is to sing those very hymns, right? That's the importance of memorizing or learning hymns, right? When you don't have the words, the scriptures have the words, right? And when you don't have the words to praise her, right, or to respond, you know, we can go to the words of the scripture of the hymns that we've grown up with, right, and memorize, because they're full of profound meaning. The sages, the saints, the scriptures, the ones who wrote the scriptures, or the scenes of the scriptures, they have just the right thing to say, and we don't have the right thing to say, right? And so they began to sing hymns to her, right? Known hymns, right? Then she responds. Then by that time, they've calmed down. They're now reciting verses and hymns praising her, right? And then she responds, satisfied with their prayers, right? And then another level of dialogue, of revelation, realization, revelation, realization starts as the actual text, the actual content, the teachings of the Devi Gita haven't even started yet. We haven't gotten there yet, right? It happens after all this, right? So the importance of the benefit of reciting and learning text is very important. There is a great importance not only of learning text, but memorizing text, right? Having some verses. I mean, everybody can learn sarva-mangala-mangalye shive sarvāra-tasādike sharanye trambake gauri narayani namaste. These simple verses, you can one or two of these verses, right? Guru verse, a Krishna verse, some Devi verses, you know, like these verses are not hard to learn. If you do them every day as part of your sadhana, right? The gods did it for thousands of years, divine years, right? To get everything. We can do it every day for our sadhana. They enter, they do stuff that we don't understand. Their meaning, just like this image that they saw, right, has so much information and packed in it, right? Seeing her and understanding her, right, are simultaneously. Similarly, these verses have so much information, so much meaning, so much sentiment, right? Hearing and singing these verses is also a type of seeing. It's also a type of darshan. It's a different type of darshan. There's a lot of philosophy, a lot of theology, a lot of sentiment in these verses, right? And they go deep into consciousness, right? I may have told the story. Also, there was a professor, Robert Bella, very famous professor, UC Berkeley, one of the luminaries in the sociology of religion. He was old when I was many years ago in school, but he told a story, right, of when his mom, I think, pretty sure it was a long time ago, but his mom was passing. She was in a coma for a long time, right? And so they invited a priest or a minister or somebody to come and do some prayers. And the family, you know, gathered around me. Mom's going to leave her body soon. We should do some last rite type stuff, sacrament. And so the priest did the appropriate rites as per their family tradition, their religious tradition. And then, you know, something to hold the group together. He said, let's all hold hands around your mother and recite the Lord's Prayer. And they all held hands. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Like this, the prayers happen. If I started it, most of you probably know it, even if you haven't been in the church for many years, or you go to a very different type of church now, right? You probably still know this because you memorized these things, right? And he says that his mom, which was unconscious, seemingly unconscious for months, right? Even her eyes closed, recited. We heard them saying the prayer and said the prayer, right? It's there. right? You know, even unconsciously, who knows how it's there. These something you've said every day, year after year is there, right? And that's a secret. Of course, prayers are great, and hymns are great, and lists of 1,000 named hymns are great. I remember one yogi said, 1,000 names is good, one name's better, right? So your own mantra, right? Your own prayer, right? Do that again and again and again. It goes deep in consciousness. And our hope is, at the time of death, it will come up into our mind. Hopefully these prayers took this Professor Bella's mother to her divine destination. There's another story in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Vaishnava text, of Gajendra the elephant. Maybe you know this story. So Gajendra was king of the elephants, and this happened in Indraloka, not on earth. And he was the king of the elephants, and he came with his group of elephants, I forget what a group of elephants, pod of elephants or something, I forget, pride of elephants came to bathe, right, in the river, and the king of crocodiles, right, very dramatic right now, there's video going around of crocodiles in the Ganga that have washed up into neighborhoods due to flooding in Allahabad. So I've been watching neighborhoods I know with huge crocodiles wandering the streets. You know, I don't know if I can bathe in the Ganga anymore. I don't. It's quite. I didn't know they were there, but apparently there was giant crocodiles. You can see. So the crocodile grabbed Gajendra's leg, and they started, and the water began to fight, right? And the fight lasted. They said they were both equally matched, right? So Gajendra couldn't win, and the crocodile couldn't win. It's just suffering, struggle of existence, right? Maybe you know all about it. I know all about this one, right? And it said that the fight lasted 100 years. 100 years means the life of a person, right? 100 years is the life, supposed to be the life. That means the struggle happened for life, right? And he wasn't winning, and he wasn't losing. There's no way, he did not have the strength to win, right? And his wives were there, the other elephants. Nobody could help him, right? This is the situation we find ourselves often in. But then in a previous life, right? In a previous life, he was a yogi, and who was initiated into mantra, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, right? And he remembered this holy mantra, right? Came in, even though here he's just an elephant. I can't say just an elephant, it's a glorious being, but in the story, he's just an elephant, right? Not a yogi, right? In his previous life, he had this mantra. He remembered this mantra. He called out this mantra at the moment of his need, right? A mantra came that he had practiced in a previous life. And because of the purity of that mantra, it bore fruit. And immediately Vishnu came down on Garuda, killed the crocodile, liberated Gajendra. The story is called the liberation or the saving of Gajendra, right? And so that story is one of the main stories in the Srimad Bhagavatam on the importance of japa, regular practice, and the recitation of prayers and stotrams. Recite every day till you memorize it, again and again, every morning chant, every evening chant, whatever your text you're doing, text that's important to you, as well as your own mantra again and again. In this life, it will help us, but even if in this life it doesn't, maybe in the next life it will help us. We don't know, right? And so back to our gods, they also prayed, they also began to recite these hymns that they already knew. These are the same hymns that they chanted early on to get Maz. And then from that, the hymns gave the language to what they were appropriate to what they were experiencing when they didn't have the words. They pulled themselves together, recited these beautiful hymns, and then the next level of realization came. So I think I'm going to go back here. Since we finished this description, I'm just going to read her description so we can let this pass through our mind, what we've read of the Devi's description so far. I'm going to start on verse 26 through 43. These are the verses we'll read. Right. Suddenly on the 9th lunar day in the months of Chaitra, on a Friday, that lustrous power revealed in the scriptures appeared before the gods. Praised on all sides by the 4 Vedas incarnate, it blazed like 10 million suns, yet soothed like 10 million moons. flashing like 10 million streaks of lightning tinged with red. That supreme lustrous power shone forth, encompassed above, across, and in the middle. Without beginning or end, it had no body, no hands, nor other limbs, nor did it have a woman's form, a man's form, nor the two combined. The dazzling brilliance blinded the eyes of the gods, O king. When again their vision returned, the gods beheld that light appearing now in the form of a woman, charming and delightful. She was exceedingly beautiful of limb, a maiden in the freshness of youth. Her full upraised breasts put to shame the swelling buds of the lotus. Her girdle and anklets jingled with clusters of tinkling bells. She was adorned with a necklace, armlets, and bracelets of gold. Her throat resplendent with a chain of priceless gems. The locks of her cheeks shimmered like black bees swarming on a delicate cateka flowers, blooms. An exquisite line of down on her midriff enhanced the charm of her shapely hips. She was chewing on tumbula mixed with bits of camphor. Pendant earrings of shining gold graced her lotus face. Above long eyebrows, her forehead shone like an image of the crescent moon. Her eyes were red lotus petals, her nose dignified, her lips like nectar. Her teeth resembled buds of white jasmine. A string of pearls adorned her neck. Her crescent-shaped crown sparkled with jewels. She was bedecked with ornaments shining like new moons. A garland of jasmine flowers brightened her luxuriant hair. Her forehead sported a saffron dot, while her three eyes reflected her playful mood. Three-eyed and four-armed, she held a noose and goad, while gesturing her beneficence and assurance of safety. She was dressed in red and appeared lustrous like blooms of the pomegranate. Richly adorned in garments all suited for love, she was worshipped by all the gods. Satisfying all desires, she is the mother of all, the deluder of all. The mother's kindly face, so gracious, displayed a tender smile on the lotus mouth. This embodiment of unfeigned compassion, the gods beheld in their presence. Seeing her, the embodiment of compassion, the entire host of gods bowed low, unable to speak, choking on tears in silence, struggling to regain their composure, their necks bending in devotion, their eyes brimming with tears of living joy. They glorified the world mother with hymns. This is the final picture I wanted to show. This is a new picture by Art Argya. If you can see it on the Facebook, Art Argya, a great Bengali artist of tantric art. This is his latest picture, fairly recent picture of Bhuvaneshwari, posted just a few days back. And this is a different scene. This is the Bhuvaneshwari in the highest heaven, when the gods come up and realizing that they're not supreme, that she's supreme, that the goddess reigns supreme. So it's a beautiful picture. But it has a lot of the iconographic images, what she's holding, how she's dressed, right? Red cloth, her earrings, her anklets, her bracelets, all the moon in her hair, all that is shown beautifully in the image. I can get a little closer. And below is Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva in that image, and the goddesses worshiping her in the highest heaven of Manidvip. So we'll end there tonight. Thank you for your patience and kind attention. Next week we'll pick up on the verses, the first verse at least, from the Chandi Devi Mahatmyam, that reveals another aspect of who is this goddess, and who is this goddess that's going to be teaching, right? What's her real nature? Very, very fascinating. Hari Om Tat Sat. Sri Guru Maharaj Ji ki jai, Mahamayi ki jai, Swamiji Maharaj Ji ki jai. Jai Bhuvaneshwari Devi ki jai, Ma Dakshineshwari Bhavatarini Dakshinakali ki jai, Saptarishi ki jai. Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om. Any comments or questions? Om. Nothing. All right. Well, that was easy. It is also 3. Okay then. See you next Wednesday. God is willing. Jai. All blessings. Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om. Good night. Elijah, good night. Giriji, Alex, Jai Ma. Hari Om, Hari Om. Jai Ma, Giri. It must be hot in Idlewild.
Yeah, 100 degrees up here in Ohio.
It was 98 here in Laguna, in the
Yeah.
canyon.
Yeah.
So I'm glad we matched. Jai Ma.
Jai Ma.
Good night.